so often the assumption in organizations is that HR, well, you're the people, so culture is yours. You own it, right? And there couldn't be anything farther from the truth. HR plays a major role in a lot of human resource related activities that can build and influence culture. But culture is everyone's job in the organization, right? The HR shoulders are not broad enough to carry that 100% of the time and 100% of the responsibility. Welcome to the BetterCulture Podcast, where we make the clear connection between better culture and better business. This podcast is for leaders who want to build stronger teams, drive thriving companies, and enjoy your leadership role along the way. Now here's your host, Brett Hoogeveen, a leadership and culture aficionado, keynote speaker, and co-founder of BetterCulture.
Welcome back to another episode of the BetterCulture Podcast. Today's episode is all about whether or not culture is an HR initiative, whether or not whose responsibility really is culture. And I have with me my partner in culture crime, Kevin Hensel, our senior consultant here at BetterCulture, and he and I are going to have a little bit of a chat about whose responsibility really is culture. Now, Kevin's background, he's done a lot of different things across several different organizations, but one of which of those things was running HR for a good size organization. And so, Kevin, any opening thoughts today on this conversation of whose job really is culture and how much of it is on HR, people operations shoulders?
You bet, right? Well, the assumption, Brett, again, exciting conversation, near and dear to my heart, because so often the assumption in organizations is that HR, well, you're the people, so culture is yours. You own it, right? And there couldn't be anything farther from the truth. HR plays a major role in a lot of human resource related activities that can build and influence culture. But culture is everyone's job in the organization, right? The HR shoulders are not broad enough to carry that 100% of the time and 100% of the responsibility.
How do you think a typical HR department looks at something like culture? I mean, how do they frame it? How do they view it? What does that even look like to someone whose job is to oversee the human resources of an organization?
Yeah, well, again, the components, the natural components of human resources, all of them fit into that broader culture picture, right? So as we at BetterCulture talk about culture and leadership being about attracting, building, motivating, and retaining absolute top talent, right? So human resources is directly involved in that process from a recruitment standpoint, right? So what are the recruitment and hiring processes so that you're creating that pool of opportunity of the kind of like-minded, right-minded individuals that fit appropriately into your organization? How are you interviewing and training those that are conducting interviewing to be sure that you're really getting to the root of finding that top talent? And then from an acquisition standpoint, what's the process? What's the onboarding process? What does the orientation process look like? Right? But then you're left to, okay, now they're out of HR's hands and they're moving into the day-to-day work and operations within the organization. And that's where the rubber meets the road, right? So I always kind of make an analogy of HR kind of is, oh, all right, well, we're watching the show, right? We're putting on a good show here. But then once you get behind the curtain, does what we presented on the stage become reality when people get into their work environment?
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. HR's role, we often say at BetterCulture that really the prime directive of a human resources department should be focused on attracting and retaining talent.
You bet.
You can throw building, in there, growing, developing talent. You can throw motivating in there a little bit, although I think most of that lies on leadership throughout the organization. But I think that's a great point and a great way to frame this. I almost think, listening to you, that when we think about culture, HR's job is to add talent to the organization, to put in place sort of the rules and the frameworks that talent is going to play by, things like compensation and how policies, procedures. It seems like culture is something that will either make that, it's a foundation that they can work from, or that all of those processes will be more efficient, more productive if you have a great culture that people will actually want to be a part of and want to stay with. If you don't, it probably makes all of those processes a bit more harder, actually, and also more transactional. Is that probably true?
You bet, right? Because if in our world, right, using our leadership loop that we've referenced in other episodes, right, you're trying to create raving fans and then create a just incredible reputation in the industry, in the community, right? And if for some reason that reputation as an organization, as a workplace isn't solid, well, now you're going to have a difficult time because word gets out. Now you're going to have a difficult time that, it might be a questionable place to work. Well, now we start the cycle of it being difficult to get the pool of appropriate quality candidates that we're looking for. So it becomes very interdependent. Again, you mentioned another function of human resources is, well, what's our compensation program? What are our benefits packages looking like, right? All of that also plays into culture.
Sure.
But it's that ability to attract the right talent into the organization, and then trust from a human resources standpoint, and participate in as well, helping to develop leaders and supervisors appropriately, that in that day-to-day work, people are having the experience that they signed up for.
I agree. Let's get specific, all right? For the rest of this episode, I really want to talk about what are the things related to this culture phenomenon that we're discussing on the show. What are the things specifically that HR should own related to that goal and objective of creating a great place to work, employee engagement, et cetera? And what are the things that HR can't own, right? That other people are responsible for. So let's start with the first one. Let's come up with a good sort of bulleted list of the types of things that if you want to create a great place to work, have engaged employees that leads to all of the business benefits that show up. What are some of the things that HR has to own or that really are on their shoulders?
Yeah. Well, again, right off the bat, it's a recruitment standpoint, right? And working closely as a partner in the organization to be sure that there is a clear understanding of the needs of the talent within the organization, and then being able to go appropriately and seek and find that talent. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So onboarding, recruiting, getting talent in the door.
Absolutely, yeah. Right? For most HR departments, right, learning and development falls in there as well. So it's a training opportunity for the new talent. Again, somewhat onboarding, somewhat skills training, but then it's also leadership development, supervisory development, that support within the organization. So again, the experience stays consistent throughout. Certainly coaching and those boundaries, right? So from a performance standpoint, being sure that culture is woven into the evaluation process, right?
Yeah.
And then of course, tactically, being sure that compensation is appropriate as well, that the compensation structure is correct.
Yeah, I want to talk a bit about compensation. I would say I'd add to your list evaluation processes, right? We see organizations that say, oh yeah, we value culture, but when they're actually evaluating their employees' performance, there's nothing on that evaluation that relates to how they show up and how they contribute to the culture.
It's all very technical.
Yes, it's all just, hey, did you meet these metrics or et cetera? Well, if you value culture, you should pay people according to that, with their contribution to that culture or their whether or not they pull away from those culture goals, et cetera.
Well, and on the similar but different, right? I think HR also needs to own engagement survey.
Yeah.
Right? Who's getting the read of how people are really experiencing the organization?
Yes.
Right?
For all of our clients that say that they have a goal around employee experience and culture, you have to have some metric to measure that if you're serious about it. Yeah. And there are a bazillion ways to do an effective engagement survey, including our own BetterCulture survey. But typically, I mean, in 99% of the time, it is your people function that oversees that survey process.
Right. So while there's definitely, right, virtually every organization is evaluating their people. Are you providing an opportunity for the people to be evaluating the organization?
Yeah. I'll throw in one last thing from me, at least, that HR typically owns, and that's policies, procedures, things like that. And those aren't typically a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I would say in the organizations where the policies and procedures are especially not fun, they're cumbersome, they're overly legal, that sometimes can hold back culture. And so just understanding your human resource function, your employment attorney's function, and what they do for the organization as far as protecting the company, making sure that we're complying with certain things, that we're legally protected. If you lean all the way in that direction with policy and procedure, there is some chance that that ends up having sort of a negative consequence on people's actual everyday experience, because people can't just show up and do what makes sense on a daily basis, right?
In that regard, again, I kind of imagery standpoint, I always say, right, that the policies and the procedures are the guardrails and the boundaries. And how can your organization broaden those guardrails, right? So that the work that can be done has a broader space to be done in.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, broadening the guardrails. Okay, anything we missed on what really should be on HR's shoulders here?
Yeah, well, certainly, again, in order to maintain that appropriate culture, there's accountability. There's feedback that has to be given to individuals, right? Both positive, certainly, right? Increase the likelihood that good stuff continues to happen and moves the culture forward. Unfortunately, the reality is some people need some feedback and some corrective action, right? So HR should be another partner in that process.
Yeah.
To be able to be sure that the culture is being maintained and progresses appropriately.
Love it. Okay, before we switch to the things that HR absolutely can't control, I can't help but put a quick plug in for some of the work we've been doing lately on helping organizations chart a clearer strategy around people and culture. And I think that's something that an HR team can lead and should lead, is if your goal is to create a better workplace experience for employees and systematically improve that continuously over time, that really should be a strategic process, and someone should have a bigger vision than just sort of a book of the month perspective, or what seems like a good idea, or what's some low-hanging fruit we could fix today. If you want to back up and have a bit more of a strategy around how we're going to continuously improve our leaders and our culture, that can be something that HR people can lean into.
Absolutely.
And it depresses me a little bit, actually, how often I've been in a boardroom with executives and I will ask, do you have a strategy for culture? And everybody will kind of say, well, I'm not sure. And they'll all look at the HR person, and the HR person will say, that's my job. No one explicitly told me that, right? I don't have a strategic plan for culture, and companies should. They should have a plan for that. And it's something, if you're an HR person listening, I'd encourage you, don't wait around to be asked for that. Put that on your plate yourself and say, hey, look, I'm going to get a little bit more strategic about how we're going to improve this culture this month, this quarter, this year, 3 years, 5 years from now, and chart a little bit of a more strategic vision.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that strategy, right, oftentimes HR needs to be the one educating other leaders within the organization that it is a holistic approach.
Yes.
Versus, well, we bought the ping pong table for the break room and we bring the keg out on Friday, right? That culture does not make.
Yes, that does not make culture.
And again, I'm not judging or faulting, but it certainly can be HR's role, to your point, to lean in and do the educating around what does that strategy and that holistic approach look like? What are all of the components that need to be considered?
Love it. Okay, so we did actually put a fair amount of stuff on HR's shoulders related to culture. I'm not saying it's most of it. I'm just saying there's if there's a department that's going to oversee culture, it probably is your human resources department. Now, they need a lot of help, okay? They can sort of set the stage, but then we've got to put on the play, right? So let's talk about, when we think about culture, culture is an employee's experience working for your company on a daily basis. It's the attitudes and the behaviors that they experience from their coworkers, that they run into from their team on a daily basis. That's really what culture is. It's a daily experience. It is not your core values. It is not a slogan on the wall. It is not the team offsite once a quarter. It is not the casual Friday. It is, what does work feel like every single day.
Right.
Okay. In the moment, every day. That's really what culture is. So let's talk about some of those major things that influence culture that HR absolutely cannot own and influence. What comes to mind?
Yeah. I certainly immediately the behavior of others.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a big bucket. Yes.
Right? Because to your point, when you're in the work environment, certainly the individual that typically has the greatest influence is your own supervisor.
Yeah.
Right? And so what does that relationship look like? What does that day-to-day experience look like? But too often we forget about how much peers influence each other. Right? And so kind of going back to HR's potential influence in that is being available to be a coach versus, again, that very prescriptive or tactical or, well, here's the policy and here's the procedure, right?
Right.
Can HR play a role in helping coach through and with maybe some challenging behaviors to help people get to a better spot?
I want to stop you right there. And I want to just I can't help but just lean into this concept and sort of maybe educate on a perspective here for a little bit for anybody listening. Culture is the attitudes and behaviors of a group of people, right? That you experience on a regular basis in a work setting. So if you want to improve that culture, you've got to identify the behaviors you want and then influence those behaviors.
Right.
And when we do work with clients, we focus on two specific sets of behaviors, the behaviors of leaders. So what does it mean to be a leader? How does a leader show up? And all of the things that a leader can do that will help them build a healthier team and culture. That's what we do with our leadership training. And then more recently, with our 20 Tenets of Culture approach, we talk explicitly about what behaviors can everybody show up with to help contribute to a healthier team and culture. And I know that makes us a bit unique in the leadership space that we focus so much on this behavioral perspective, but it's because we care about culture, and culture is, as you just said, the behavior of others, right? And so sorry, I'm on a roll here.
No, that's great.
All of the data shows the main thing that affects culture is just what you said. It's the behavior of others. And it's, if you think about one employee, it's how their manager shows up is the biggest factor. And the second biggest factor is how their colleagues show up.
Right.
Those are by far overwhelmingly in the 50 to 70 to 80% of how that employee feels about their whole company is related to just those things: their relationship with their manager and the experience they have with their colleagues on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And HR can't control any of that on a random Tuesday.
It's funny, and we have said in the past, but you've hit cultural nirvana in an organization when the peers have adopted and embraced the culture to such a great extent that they are the ones protecting and maintaining that culture.
Yes.
Right? That they say, no, that's not how this works around here. This isn't how we behave around here. That doesn't have to come from, we've got to report it to the supervisor or it's got to go to HR. Nope. People keep each other in check and say, no, that's not how this works.
Yes. When you value the culture you have, you will start to protect the culture that you have and champion the culture that you have. It becomes a self-sustaining flywheel.
You bet. You bet. Because people are then loving the experience that they're having, and they don't want that to go away.
Yeah. Okay. So that's by far the biggest bucket is just how people show up, managers, direct peer employees. Is there anything else, big things that obviously HR can't control? Anything we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah. Well, what immediately comes to mind is the physical work environment.
Sure.
What is that like? Do people have the tools and the resources that they need necessarily to get the work done? That's a big influence on that experience every day as well.
Yeah. I mean, that really can be overlooked. Physical environment, lighting, music, how comfortable or ergonomic your chair is, or those things that make actually the work more enjoyable that aren't behavioral of your colleagues. All of those things do play into everyday work experience and culture.
Right.
Yeah. I think about things like trust, right? Trust between coworkers. I mean, that's something that HR can't control. Psychological safety in that team, in that work environment, again, on a random Tuesday afternoon, HR can't control. Let's see.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah.
Anything else come to mind?
I go back to your point around trust and psychological safety, right? Do people feel as though they are valued within their team, within their organization, that they're contributing, right? Is there recognition going on to the contributions that they're bringing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. One big last thing that comes to mind, and then if you have anything else, would love to kind of wrap up this segment of what HR can and can't control. But a big one that HR cannot control all by themselves is executive commitment and follow through to making culture a priority, right? We can put the best strategy possible in place. We can have an awesome employer brand and a great core values and an awesome onboarding process. And, we can have great leadership training and we can have everything lined up just how we want it. And then the next quarter rolls around and, there's an urgent priority for the business. And if executives show up in a way that says, hey, that's really not what's important right now. What's important right now is boom, 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 whatever today's priority is, you're really whitewashing this prioritization of employee experience and culture. If the people with the highest titles in your organization and the most power in the organization don't role model the culture that you want and don't really value it. Now, they don't have to do all of the work of lifting the culture every day, but if they're breaking it, then you've got a problem. You're only going to go so far if you don't have your top executives really walking the walk on a regular basis.
Right. Well, and again, I'll take it back to that's where HR has to continue to speak up and continue to educate and continue to reinforce. I literally was part of an executive team where in an executive team meeting, the CEO said, XYZ, that's our greatest asset. And I said, whoa, no, back up. People are our greatest asset. Right. That's important, but people will always be our greatest asset. And it was that's right. Yeah. You've just got to keep it forefront, right? Our leadership principle number one, never-ending focus on mission, culture, and excellence, right?
Yes.
Culture is included in that statement for a reason. Never-ending focus on culture.
Yeah, because your people are going to implement your strategy. Your people are going to carry out whatever your top priority is that you've got going on that isn't people and culture, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, absolutely. And I think that strategy piece I talked about earlier, if you're listening and you're thinking, my executive team has some work to do. There's some rough spots there. I've got a few people that definitely don't value culture presently. They kind of nod their heads when the CEO says we should, but they don't always walk the walk. That's the perfect opportunity to put in place an intermediate to longer term strategy on saying, okay, how can we make some baby steps with those folks?
Right.
How can we get them to slowly sort of board the train or sand down a few of those rough edges or become a little more self-aware? This does not need to be a snap your fingers overnight, transition. Slow and steady really will win the race here. We just need to keep culture a consistent priority. And you won't feel like you're making progress with a couple of raw executives maybe in 3 months, but over 3 years, if you just kind of keep that conversation open and help them continue to grow themselves, you won't believe how much progress you can make.
Yeah. And I would add to that, Brett, that even those small baby steps, people start recognizing something's different here. Yeah. Something's shifting here. Right? And they may not be able to identify it because it is slow and steady, but it's not long before people start realizing, something's a little different around here.
Yeah. All right. I want to close this episode about what HR can and can't do around culture with. Do either one of us have just a closing comment on what's one thing that our HR friends wish that everybody else understood about really what it takes to build a great culture, right? Because it can't all be on HR's shoulders. So let's summarize our conversation. It's okay if we repeat, but what's one thing that HR leaders wish everybody else knew, that this isn't just my job?
Yeah. Well, I think you've answered the question in the question, right?
I might have.
I think the answer is, I need people to understand this is not just my job.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. I can't beat that. I can't top that. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate your insights. This is another fun episode. Let's keep making the world a better place to work. Thanks for being here.
Super. Thanks, everybody.
Want to take the next step to building a stronger culture? We're offering a free 15-minute Better Culture strategy call directly with me. We'll take the time to help you identify real opportunities to make your workplace better. No sales pitch, just real advice to help you lead better. Grab your time right now at betterculture.com/free call. Let's make something even better together.